Hey everyone, and welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about the G.I. Joe Wrath of Cobra demo that just released on Steam a few days ago. Now if you follow the channel, you know I've been covering every bit of information we can get about this game because being an 80s kid, G.I. Joe is among one of my most cherished franchises from that era. I mean, it's right up there with TMNT, Masters of the Universe, and Transformers. But let's be honest, G.I. Joe has not had the best luck in the video game format. Most of the games that have come out have always felt like easy cash grabs trying to cash in on the property. But that's why when they announced a retro-style beat-em-up, a genre that feels like a perfect fit for the franchise, I was really hyped. Now I know some of you would say it would fit in even better with a run-and-gun shooter, but there was a lot of hand-to-hand fighting in the show, so nonetheless I think it is a pretty good genre. So now that brings us to the demo. Now obviously I'm looking forward to the game more on the Nintendo Switch. However, since the demo is currently only available on Steam, I decided to review it nonetheless. And if you've been looking forward to this game, I think this is an important video for you to watch. And just remember as we jump in, if you are liking the content, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. So first of all, let's talk about what's available in the demo. You have two playable characters, Duke and Scarlet. You also have two different playable levels that you can play with each one of the characters. Now each one of the levels will offer you multiple grunt enemies to fight through, with some being exclusive to each one of the levels. You'll also face down a mini boss about halfway through the level, and then finally a main boss at the end, with one level featuring Dr. Mindbender and the other one featuring the Baroness. Now neither of these levels seem to be the first level of the game. When you actually load up a sky full of snakes, it tells you it's supposed to be level 3. Madness in the Mountain, however, loads directly into the level, and there was no splash on the screen letting you know where this level is supposed to be in the overall setup of the game. Now, as we move through this review, I also do want to mention there is a sticker in the bottom right corner letting you know that this is a demo and that the gameplay is subject to change. So although we'll be reviewing what we have in front of us right now, this might not end up being honest to the final product. And based on my experience with the demo, that's maybe not a bad thing. Now getting back to the gameplay, you also have multiple difficulty settings. However, to be totally honest, I tried a few different ones, and there seems to be very little difference in the overall experience, other than enemies maybe dying quicker. Now the controls themselves in the game are also very simple, with the options of a light attack, a heavy attack, a block button, and a jump button. You also have the R trigger that serves to launch your special attack when you fill up your special meter, represented by a blue bar right under your health. Now there are a few context sensitive controls. For example, the light attack button will allow you to pick up an enemy when they're on the ground, or also a weapon when it's at your feet. And when you're holding a weapon, the light attack button will fire off the weapon, the heavy attack button will throw the weapon at your enemies. Now other than that, you really have no other controls. And this brings us our first issue. The control scheme is extremely limited, with the only real combo available is stringing together 3 light attacks. It is possible to alternate between light and heavy attacks when you're fighting enemies, but it's not actually a combo. It's each one of these moves acting independently. You also have the ability to launch an aerial attack when you're in the air, but both the light and heavy attack launch the exact same aerial attack. Now to be fair, these moves are different depending on which character you're playing with, Duke or Scarlet, so at least there's a little bit of variation in the animations and the way the attacks play out. For example, Duke does a dropping heel kick when you do his aerial attack. Scarlet, on the other hand, takes out her crossbow and launches an arrow. But unfortunately, what this produces is that the combat overall played out is very bland and repetitive. And worst of all, you can actually infinitely chain your jab punch, especially with Duke, which is overall actually the most efficient way of dispatching enemies since they never fall over and you can basically just combo them out infinitely. This is definitely something that, if possible, should be patched out of the game. You should not be able to infinitely string your jab. Now is maybe a really good time before we get any deeper to mention that I really hope the devs get this feedback, because I do think there's the possibility to have a really great game here. It just needs a lot of extra work. Because although I'm talking about some of the negatives at first, there are some positives here as well. And don't worry, we will get to those before the end. However, I do want to finish up the gameplay section because I want to talk about both the mini bosses and also the final bosses. Now, the two mini bosses we get in the levels are, for one, the Hiss Tank, and then the other one, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name, but this walking Cobra robot type thing. And here, what these fights really highlight is, number one, the AI in the game is really bad. A lot of the enemies just stand around waiting to get punched, occasionally launching an attack, but definitely not acting the way a beat 'em up AI should act to create a really fun gameplay scenario. And this is true even at the higher difficulty levels. And both these mid bosses, I'm sorry, especially the Hiss Tank, is really oddly designed, because you can actually hit the Hiss Tank without at all being in the way of its lasers, and since there's no contact damage, there's actually zero risk that this boss can hit you, and you can launch your combos non-stop as long as you're positioned correctly, which makes this boss feeling very, very boring. And for such an iconic part of the G.I. Joe franchise like the Hiss Tank, this just feels unacceptable. Now, the walking robot Cobra did feel a little bit more challenging since it can actually walk all around the screen. However, at the same time, once you figure out that once it launches its heavy attack, it just can't move anymore, it just becomes a damage sink and you're waiting for the fight to end. The bosses are actually no better. The bosses themselves are very limited attack-wise. The only difference is that you can't knock them down, which is something that they do in a lot of beat 'em up games with bosses to sort of increase the challenge level. But once again, they get locked in these long animation attacks, and once you know what those are, you just basically rinse and repeat till the fight is over. And another really odd thing, the bosses seem to be immune to your special attacks, which just makes absolutely no sense. Now, maybe they did this because the bosses would be even easier if they were subject to your special attacks, and they didn't want that, but it just feels like poor design. Now, after getting all that off my chest, it feels like a good time to maybe talk about a few of the better points of the game, however. First of all, I want to say I really like the pixel art. The representation of all the characters feels honest to the source material, and I do like the pixel art style chosen here. Obviously, from time to time, it feels better to have bigger sprites, but if they're aiming at multiplayer gameplay here, it does feel better with these smaller sprites taking up less of the screen, leaving more place for the action and the maneuvers. There are, however, two little things that I definitely think could be improved here. Number one, the jump animation just looks totally weird, where even with Scarlet, it feels like you float in the air for a second if you're moving at the same time. That should really be worked on. That animation is just bad. And secondly, although I really like the artwork to the level designs, they're a little bit too linear, always moving to the right, never going a little bit down or up, which really brings the levels to life, making you feel like you're walking through a real enemy base, not just moving from one screen to the other. And if you look at some of the best beat 'em ups out there, that's exactly how they design their levels. If you look at Shredder's Revenge or Streets of Rage 4, there's a lot of verticality to the levels. And probably, at least for the moment, the best point overall is the sound design in the game. But that is no surprise since T. Lopes worked on the soundtrack. Sound design wise, this game is stellar. Which is why I said there's a ton of potential here, because a lot of the basics are good here. The artwork is good, the pixel work is good, the sound design is good, and even the basics of the combat system have potential. They just really need to be diversified. However, for the moment, if this demo is reflective of the final product, I'm unfortunately disappointed. But as I said earlier, I really do hope that the devs get the feedback and that they go back to the drawing board and fix what needs to be fixed. And you know, I would really love to hear from all of you. This demo is free and available on Steam. Download it, play it, let me know what you think. But that's going to be it for today. On the way out, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you aren't already, and click on that notification bell so you know when all my future content comes out. And as usual, hope I'll see you in my next video.